welcome to John Lennon's New York. Here we are standing just across New York City on the edge of the Hudson River in New Jersey with the beautiful skyline in back of us, including the Empire State Building. My name is Trina Unikos. I've been a tour guide showing Beatles and John Lennon sites in New York for over 5 years. And this is my co-host, Susan Ryan.
Hi, I'm Susan Ryan, and I'm the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Beatles webzine Rooftop Sessions, and I'm also an amateur New York City historian with lots of information about the buildings behind us.
And during the program, we're going to be showing you a lot of sites linked with John Lennon's life here in New York City after the Beatles broke up. John Lennon lived here from 1971 to 1980. And John thought New York was the cultural center of the world. He thought New York was comparable to Rome during the days of the Roman Empire. So he thought, where else would he want to be except New York City?
That's right. Now, it's kind of early in the morning right now and a little bit hazy, but it's supposed to get really hot and sunny later. And we're going to take you around New York on a beautiful sunny day, hopefully, and get us going, and let's head out into New York City.
So let's head on to the first site on the Upper West Side, the famous Tavern on the Green restaurant.
Sounds great. Let's go.
So we're starting the tour here on the Upper West Side. We're standing in front of the Tavern on the Green restaurant. It's actually at 67th Street and Central Park West. And for John Lennon's 39th and 40th birthdays, they held birthday parties for him and his son Sean. And actually this restaurant is very famous, and it was owned by Warner Leroy.
Right. Warner Leroy was a famous restaurateur here in New York. He had show business in his blood. He was the son of the famous film director Mervyn Leroy and the grandson of Warner Brothers mogul Harry Warner. And that's why he was named Warner Leroy. And he also owned the Russian Tea Room, which was on 57th Street. In fact, is on 57th Street. It was closed for a while and has since been reopened. The restaurant is currently owned by his daughter, Jennifer Oz Leroy. And Warner Leroy was actually a neighbor of the Lennons at the Dakota. And his children would play with Sean when they were small.
And interestingly enough, Yoko, for the 39th birthday, she gave John and Sean actual life-size dummies of themselves. An interesting gift.
Very interesting.
And then for his 40th birthday, she decided to have a skywriting message done in the sky here. And it said, "Happy birthday, John and Sean, love Yoko." And it was actually written in the sky 9 times. That was one of John's favorite numbers.
And 9 was a number that followed John all his life. He was born on October 9th, and 9 was very significant to him. And actually, the number seemed to follow him even here in New York. At the Dakota, which is on 72nd Street, which adds up to 9, they lived in apartment 72, which also adds up to 9. The skywriting, it's an interesting thing. I actually remember seeing the skywriting in the sky that day. I lived in Queens, one of the outer boroughs, but I had come into the city that day. I must have come in to see John or to try and see John. I used to do that. And I remember seeing the skywriting in the sky and being feeling very privileged that I had seen Yoko's birthday message to John and Sean.
So here at the Tavern on the Green, actually, it looks like they're having a special event today because there's a lot of tents. You can't see the entrance too well. But actually, they're known for decorating really nicely during the holidays. Have you ever seen that?
I have, actually, and they have fairy lights on all the trees, and they have them all year round. They're much easier to see when the trees are bare, but they wire the trees with lights all up the branches. It's very pretty, and you can see it when you're walking on Central Park West or in the evenings. And they're also famous for their garden in the back, which has topiaries. Bushes and shrubs cut into the shapes of animals and lit with the lights. So it's really very famous for its location and its outdoor and indoor decor.
And it was just a short distance from the Dakota, so it was really convenient for John and Yoko to come here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Trina, so where do we go from here? More tour.
So we're actually only about 5 blocks from Strawberry Fields. So on our way to the Dakota, why don't we walk through the park?
It's a very nice walk through the park on a spring day.
Okay, great.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Strawberry Fields. We're actually at around 72nd Street, but we've entered Strawberry Fields through the park. And Strawberry Fields was renamed on what would have been John Lennon's 45th birthday in 1985. And it's a 2.5-acre section of the park. And it's named, of course, after John Lennon's famous song, Strawberry Fields Forever, about the orphanage in Liverpool.
And what's really funny is that some people seem to think that the famous gates at Strawberry Fields, which you've seen pictures of, are here in New York. They're not. They're in Liverpool. Strawberry Fields in New York is just a piece of the park that was dedicated in John's memory.
And actually, it's intended as an international garden of peace. And Yoko came up with the idea, and she put an ad in the New York Times asking countries from around the world to donate items for the section of the park. Most countries donated their native plants, but Italy chose to donate a beautiful mosaic, which we're going to walk up and see in a few minutes. And Yoko actually donated $1 million to the project, roughly half for construction and half for maintenance.
So she pays for the maintenance of this section of the park and helps the Parks Department out with that. So.
And the park, Central Park, is actually over 800 acres large. It's a very historic park.
It was one of the first urban parks that was designed specifically as a park, a place for leisure. And when they laid out the original street grid of New York City, they laid out the area for the park. It was designed by the architect, or landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted, who designed many famous parks and cemeteries and other beautiful landscapes, both in New York City and other parts of the country.
And the park actually just celebrated its 150th year anniversary a few years ago. And relating to music, a lot of big concerts have been held here on the Great Lawn, which is at 80th Street. Concerts like Simon and Garfunkel, Diana Ross, more recently Dave Matthews.
So many artists have played here. I was at the Simon and Garfunkel concert all those years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So we're actually going to walk up and show you the dedication plaque that was unveiled when the Strawberry Fields opened. So here we are at the dedication plaque. Actually, there was a groundbreaking ceremony in March of 1984, and Yoko, Sean, and Julian all attended. And then this plaque was unveiled in 1985 on John's birthday, and it lists 121 countries that support the area. And you were here before the area was ready, is that right?
I was here in 1983 and 1985. And I actually have some pictures from 1985, from before the official plaque was here. We've got these pictures of the temporary plaque after the area had been dedicated. And it used to be just an informal gathering of fans. They would come and spend some time here in Central Park to memorialize John on the anniversary of his death or on his birthday. It's since grown into a much more official, quote-unquote, gathering of people with organizers, and it's become more of an organized event. But even now, Yoko puts candles in the window. I've got pictures of that from 1985.
And you said she actually would send down refreshments?
Yes. In 1983, she sent some things down. She didn't send refreshments down that year, but she had been known to send down coffee or hot chocolate to people who were standing here freezing at 11 o'clock at night. And the year that I was here in 1983, she sent some of her assistants down with little presents for the crowd.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I got a Happy Christmas War is Over poster, the original one from 1969, signed by Yoko, that said, Love Yoko Ono 1983.
That's great.
Yeah, it was really cool.
So we're going to walk over to the mosaic. It's just a few steps away. At the mosaic. It says Imagine in the middle, and this area is intended as a place for quiet reflection. A lot of fans come and gather here on John Lennon's birthday every year, and also to commemorate the anniversary of his death. Have you ever come for that, Susan?
I did in 1983 and 1985, but these days it's much more of an organized event and actually very crowded, and I prefer to come on any day except John's birthday on December 8th because of the nature of the crowds.
And also there's an issue about the curfews.
Yeah, there is an issue. Central Park closes at 1 a.m. and the organizers of the event have had an ongoing dispute with the Parks Department about leaving the park at 1 in the morning, and they'd want to stay here all night, but unfortunately the Parks Department will not allow it. I find that the best time to come here is really early in the morning when there's very few people. If you really want to capture the spirit of John Lennon and the spirit of peace and quiet and meditation that this spot is known for and meant for, the best time to come here is on any day except an anniversary and early in the morning.
And also, people bring flowers and all kinds of tributes to put on the mosaic. The Park Service cleans the mosaic several times a day, so you never know what you're going to see.
You never know what you're going to see, and also any flowers are cleaned away, but the notes that are left are given to Yoko Ono.
And also, in support of the park, you can actually donate money and get your name inscribed on one of the park benches, and the money goes to help the upkeep of the park.
Yeah, Central Park Conservancy.
Yeah.
They do a great job.
And there's 3 plaques I wanted to point out. One was dedicated by Yoko to one of her friends. It says, "Have you seen a horizon lately?"
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a plaque dedicated from the people of Liverpool to honor the victims of 9/11. And also another plaque was dedicated by Ray Coleman's family. He was the author of the famous biography called Lennon. So we're going to walk past the benches and across the street to the Dakota now. So we just came out of Strawberry Fields in Central Park, and across the street here is the Dakota. We're at 72nd Street in Central Park West. And John and Yoko actually moved to the Dakota in early 1973. 2 years before that, they had been living in Greenwich Village on Bank Street, and they decided to purchase a 12-room luxury apartment here on the Upper West Side. It also included rooms for offices and storage space. The Dakota is actually a very famous apartment building in the city here.
Yeah, the Dakota has a very rich history. It was completed in 1884, and it was called the Dakota, at least local legend has it, because at the time that it was opened, it was so far uptown from everything else that people said it might as well have been in the Dakota Territories. So they called it the Dakota. Whether that's true is up to debate. There is a figurehead over the entranceway of a Dakota Indian keeping watch over the street. It was designed by the firm of Henry Hardenberg, who is the same architect who designed the Plaza Hotel. And many celebrities live there, including, well, Leonard Bernstein lived here, Judy Garland lived here, and Lauren Bacall still lives here. And it's quite the posh address and quite well known. Also, the film Rosemary's Baby was shot here.
And actually, Yoko still lives here, and she keeps buying up more space. And I want to point out that a famous shot, the back cover of Double Fantasy, John and Yoko were standing on the side of the building. Right behind us, right by, you can see in the shot the markers for the subway, and that's basically where they were standing. So we're going to stay here at the Dakota and just walk around the corner to meet Alan Tannenbaum. He's a photojournalist and photographer who had great access to John and Yoko during the release of Double Fantasy in November 1980. He took some great shots of them in front of the Dakota in Central Park and at other locations. So we're going to talk to him now. Let's go meet him. Hi, Alan. Great to see you.
Nice to see you, Trina.
Hi, Alan.
How are you?
Hi.
So you had really great access to John and Yoko around the release of Double Fantasy. That was back in November of 1980. Can you tell us how you got that assignment?
I was working for a paper called the Soho Weekly News. I'd been there since 1973, and I worked very closely with the music editor there. And when we heard that John and Yoko were coming out of seclusion after 5 years to do publicity for the release of their new album, Double Fantasy, we tried to figure out how we could do a story with them. So the music editor, Peter Occhiogrosso, had the idea of doing a story called Yoko Only, because everybody used Yoko to get to John. And since they were talking to 5 national and international media, and we were just a small newspaper downtown, we figured this might work, and it did. So we arranged to, he went up to the Dakota, made the arrangements, and then the first I had a cover shoot with Yoko in my studio, and she came downtown to my studio in Tribeca. She used to live 2 blocks away previously. And after that I made arrangements and I got a picture that I thought was nice for the cover. And then I said, well, we need some pictures for the inside. And she invited me to come up to the Dakota the next day.
And you actually took a great shot of them. Was it right at this corner here, where they're standing in front of the Dakota?
That was at the corner right here. That was after we met them. I met Yoko, I had breakfast with her, came back to her office, which is Studio One in the Dakota. And we talked about doing some pictures, and then John came down, and I had met him 5 years before. He said he remembered me from that, and so we went for a walk, and we came here to Central Park and walked around and took some nice pictures here. And then on the way back, I asked them to stop with the Dakota in the background, and they did. And
you actually attended the video shoot at a gallery downtown in Soho where they were filming a scene. They were both dressed in kimonos and they disrobed. How did you get involved with that shoot?
When we came back from Central Park after photographing them here, we went to the office in Studio One. And John was signing some album covers and he was reading the Soho News. And I heard he and Yoko talking about a video that they're going to be shooting in a few days. So I suggested to Yoko that they have a still photographer there, and she said, well, we'll see. So 5 days later, I got a call from Studio One and saying, John and Yoko are shooting in Central Park, and please come and meet them. So I came right away, and it was, compared to the other day, it was a very sunny day, brilliant autumn day. Yoko was wearing a fur jacket, John was wearing a shiny silver jacket. And then we went for some coffee at a cafe nearby, and we talked, and it was very pleasant. And afterwards, Yoko said, John feels very comfortable with you, so why don't you come with us to the studio? And I got in their limo, and we went down to a gallery in Soho, where we started working on this film, where they had the same camera that they had, and they did a scene which was basically the same thing, first in street clothes and then in kimonos, but they would walk into a simulation of their white room and disrobe and pretend to make love on the bed.
Now, how was that during the filming? Was that awkward for anybody?
No, I don't know if it was awkward. They both seemed very relaxed and comfortable, and they were used to it. They had done that before. You know, they had posed nude for their Two Virgins album cover. They had done their bed piece, and so they didn't seem too shy about it. But I was just saying to myself, this is unbelievable. I can't believe these pictures are amazing. I just can't believe I'm getting these images. It's really something.
And you actually shot them twice in Central Park, is that true?
Well, there was that day on November 21st, which was the first session, when I met them in the Dakota for the first time, and we walked here, and that was the same day as the photo in front of the Dakota. And then the other one was when they called me for the video shoot, which began in Central Park, and then afterwards we went to the studio.
And also, you went to meet them in the Dakota to show them the photos later. Is that when you took the photo of the filing room, the white room?
No, that was, the filing cabinets was on the first day that we photographed together, the same day as the Dakota picture. That was all the same day. But I didn't actually take any pictures on the day that I came to meet them. and show them the pictures from the session. So I showed them contact sheets and black and white prints and color slides. And John was in a great mood, and when he came down and he said, "Oh, there you are." And he had already seen some of the pictures which had been sent up to their apartment in Dakota, and he said, "You know what I like about your photos? You really captured Yoko's beauty." And that still touches me so much when I remember that moment. I mean, it made me so happy, and I know it made him happy that, you know, my photographs were good. You know, I saw them when, you know, just a few days before he was killed. This was the last time, and I was actually in the darkroom making prints to bring to the Dakota to give to them. When I got the news, I was finishing my work in the darkroom. I had a few more prints to go, and the editor of the Soho News came in and said, "John Lennon's just been shot."
It's terrible. How did you handle the news?
Well, I was in shock. The first news was that he had been shot, not that he had been died, and I was just hoping and praying that he was still alive. So I stopped what I was doing and grabbed my cameras, and I heard that he had been taken to Roosevelt Hospital over here, so I went there first. And there was a vigil outside the hospital, and that's where I heard that he died. So then I came here to the Dakota. There were a lot of people gathering to have a vigil and stay all night, and that's what I did. I was out here all night long.
And also, I noticed you took some pictures of Yoko after that by herself. How was that?
That was intense. I had to meet her afterwards, and you know, the grief was so thick you could cut it with a knife. It was really terrible to see what she was going through, and everybody else, the whole city was grieving, but for Yoko, this was an unimaginable tragedy. So it was difficult. And then a couple months later, I think it was in January, February, she started working on some videos for music she was planning to do. And so we were together in the park and you know, different places in Times Square to work on these videos.
So you also took photos at a famous concert John Lennon did. It was a special to salute Sir Lou Grade, and that was actually at the Hilton Hotel down on 6th Avenue. Can you tell us how that was?
This was my first meeting with John Lennon. Again, this was with the Soho News, and the editor there, a guy named Yakov Cohn, who was quite a character, an older hipster. He knew John from the East Village days, and we found out about this, so Yakov and I went up to the Hilton together for the rehearsal. And I met John, and it was amazing, and Yakov and he were talking, and I didn't speak with him very much, but I did get to meet him, and I took a lot of pictures, and he was with Tom Jones, who was also in the show, as was Peter Sellers, and then they were getting ready for the performance, so they had these amazing costumes. The band, which was called BOMF, and I'm not going to tell you what that stands for, were wearing these black jumpsuits, plastic jumpsuits. John was wearing a red one, but the band was wearing these masks on the back of their head, which was their face, you know, that had been molded, but they put it back on the head, and they had a bald head. So that's what the band looked like. And they did some cool shots backstage of them. And this was John's idea of a send-up because he thought that Sir Lou Grade, even though this was a tribute to him, was a bald and two-faced. So that's why the band was wearing these masks.
Right.
And, so I was there for the rehearsal. They did a few songs. I photographed them on stage. And I didn't know it at the time, but that turned out to be his very last public performance.
Right.
In 1980, you know, they had talked about doing performances. I'm sure they were going to do it for their new album to promote that. And I was looking forward to photographing them and maybe going on tour with them. And sadly, that was not to be. So as it turned out, I do have photographs from their last performance.
Right. And he was wearing that flashy red suit.
Yeah, that red jumpsuit. Yeah.
Well, you've had some really great photos over the years, and now this year you're going to release a book of all your photos.
Yes, I am. So it's called John and Yoko, a New York love story. This is the cover. This is the actual size. And there's a lot of photographs there that will be familiar to people, but going through my archives, I found a lot of pictures that I had forgotten about or never really saw before or never paid that much attention to before. So I really found some nuggets in the mine there, in the vault. And this is the promotion piece, but here's the picture that we were talking about here. This was from the second session in Central Park. This is the band in their jumpsuits, and this was John from that
Right.
performance. This is them from that first session, also in their office, Studio One, which is right here in North Dakota. And these are scenes from the filming for the video to promote Starting Over. And this is a classic shot of them in their kimonos. So,
Right.
and so we're very excited about this. Yoko wrote the preface,
Oh, okay.
and she's very enthusiastic about this. So, you know, we showed her the layouts, and she's just delighted. And another thing we're going to do is do a limited edition of the book. So it's going to come in a nice, beautiful clamshell box like this with a signed print as well.
These are great photos.
Thanks. And, you know, this book is going to be for everybody. The hardcover trade edition is going to be $45. And this publisher, Insight Editions, they're perfectionists. It's going to be really beautifully printed, you know, something I'm going to be very proud of. And the limited edition, they're going to sell for $200. So, and we're going to have some exhibitions to go along with this as well.
Okay.
We have exhibitions planned in Washington, D.C., opening on October 9th, 2007, and another one is going to be in New York City.
Oh, great.
So that's just for starters.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too.
It was great talking to you today.
Well, great talking with you too.
Great seeing you. Thanks
too.
a lot. Well, we enjoyed talking with Alan Tannenbaum, and now we walk a half a block and we're in front of the entrance to the Dakota. Now, John Lennon loved living in New York, and he felt really comfortable walking around the streets. He would even sign autographs for fans waiting outside. Did you ever come down to the Dakota?
Oh boy, I came down to the Dakota a lot. Every time there was a school holiday, I would come up with stories to bring my friends who weren't Beatles fans like me to come down here. I'd make up stories about why I had to be here, and it was the only place to catch a subway, and they knew after a while why I was coming here. But yes, I used to stand by here and wait for John. Unfortunately, I never saw him. I always missed him by 5 minutes in one direction or the other.
But there was that one person who actually did meet him that fateful day.
Rather unfortunately, several hours before he was killed, John signed an autograph for a fan who was waiting outside. He signed his copy of Double Fantasy. And as we probably all know at this point, or most people know, the person whose copy of Double Fantasy he signed was the man who later murdered him.
And so the night of December 8th, John and Yoko were returning from a recording session in Midtown, and their limo pulled up right in front of the entrance here. And there's a narrow driveway, but it's easier to get out of your car and walk through it. So John Lennon got out first. And behind this pillar here with the flowers on top, the gunman was hiding behind there, and when John passed, he came out from behind and shot John in the back. Now John collapsed, and he stumbled a few more steps trying to get in the building, and they realized they had to call 911. The police actually got here first, and they realized he was in such bad shape they couldn't wait for an ambulance. So they put him in the back of a police car and rushed him to Roosevelt Hospital. Unfortunately, 15 minutes later, he was pronounced dead. Now, the news spread really fast once it got out that John Lennon had been killed. And fans started gathering here for days and days. There was actually a vigil on Sunday that Yoko asked for a 10-minute range of silence. And even radio stations were silent for that 10 minutes. Now, you attended another vigil that day.
Right. Well, I was at college out on Long Island, so even though I'm from New York City and have lived here all my life, I was not able to get to Manhattan because I was at school out on Long Island. But they had vigils all over the place, all over the world, all over the country. I attended one in Eisenhower Park in East Meadow, Long Island, along with another friend from college. And there were several hundred people there, and we observed the 10-minute silence there. There was a photographer from the Long Island paper Newsday at the vigil in Eisenhower Park, and he snapped a photo of my friend Laura and myself crying, which we were unaware of until the next morning when it appeared on the front page of the Long Island edition of the paper. And I do remember people in school saying, wow, that's your 15 minutes of fame, like it was a good thing. And all I could say is that I wish there had never been a reason for the picture, because if that picture had never been taken, it would mean that John was still here with us.
So even to this day, it seems kind of awkward and eerie for me to walk by the entrance. Didn't you say one of your friends actually walked by the day after?
Yeah, when I was at school, I went to Hofstra University out on Long Island, and we created a scroll of signatures and messages that we wanted delivered to Yoko. And my then boyfriend at the time came in the next day, December 9th, to deliver it. And he came back later and told me it was probably a good thing I wasn't with him. I had wanted to go, and I said that I didn't. He said that I shouldn't. So he said when he got here, it was still roped off with crime scene tape, and he actually saw blood on the sidewalk, and it was very, very disturbing. I don't think I could have handled that.
Yeah, it's still very disturbing for people to walk by here and remember what happened. But now we're gonna keep going and go around the corner to another hangout in the neighborhood for John.
Sounds great. So here we are coming around the corner onto Columbus Avenue from West 72nd Street. We're a block from the Dakota, and we've walked west one block to Columbus Avenue and come around on the Upper West Side. And we're stopping in front of the West Side Pharmacy.
Yeah, and this pharmacy is just around the corner, so it was a very quick walk for John Lennon to come if he ever needed anything. And he actually struck up a friendship with the owner. His name was Saeed Saber.
Yeah, and apparently they had many discussions about religion. They talked about Buddhism and Islam because Mr. Saber is a Muslim. He still owns the pharmacy, and had many interesting conversations with John about religion and about peace and about the world. And they had quite a good friendship.
And actually, Mr. Saber has put some pictures in the window to remember John Lennon. It's a gorgeous picture of John in the Dakota. And also, Yoko sent over a picture just a few years ago and signed it. And also there's an article talking about Mr. Saber's admiration for John Lennon.
Yoko still shops here, from what I understand. She still is a customer.
Yeah, and lots of celebrities actually shop here because we are in an exclusive part of town, right near Central Park West.
With many celebrities live around here, yeah.
And they also have a lot of photos inside the pharmacy showing different clients. So now we're going to head over to Cafe La Fortuna. It's actually just around the corner on 71st Street. And it was a favorite hangout of John and Yoko's. So we're coming to the intersection of 71st and Columbus Avenue, and right up here is Cafe La Fortuna. It's a discreet, cute Italian cafe, and John Lennon used to come here in the mornings every day when he lived at the Dakota, because it was just a walk around the block. And he used to come here to have his favorite cappuccino and read the paper. And it's got a really cool atmosphere inside.
Yeah, it's very, very discreet and not at all the kind of place you'd find a rock star. They play classical music. They're known for their portraits of opera stars and old opera records on the wall. And it's very quiet and not at all the kind of place you'd expect to find somebody like John.
And actually, Jack Douglas, who was the producer for Double Fantasy, he said that every day during the Double Fantasy sessions, he used to come here with John in the morning and they talk about the session, and then later in the afternoon they'd meet up at the studio.
Right. Now there are some pictures of John inside the restaurant. There's a poster for the album Milk and Honey that Yoko signed and dedicated to the owner of the restaurant. There's also a couple of other portraits and pictures that were signed by John and Yoko. And there's also a letter inside, but you could talk about what it's about before we mention the letter, I think. So, you know.
Well, actually, John and Yoko's favorite table was in the corner, in the left side corner when you walk in. And as recent as last year, they were doing renovations in the cafe and they were going to get rid of the table, but instead the owner decided to ask Yoko if she wanted the table and chairs, and she was very happy about this, and she took the table and chairs in her possession.
She said that the afternoons that she spent at Cafe La Fortuna were things that she would remember forever.
And there's some great pictures in the window, actually.
Now, Cafe La Fortuna actually is currently questionable. Right now, as we speak, the building has been sold to a new owner, and this means the rent is probably going to go up exorbitantly. Unfortunately, rents on the Upper West Side of Manhattan are very high to begin with, and since this cafe's been here for so long, the rent is probably below market. They almost did not renew their lease. In fact, at this point, I don't know if they have. They're in negotiations so that the cafe will not have to close. We don't want to see the cafe close, of course. People in the neighborhood will weep. It's just a lovely place to have lunch.
Yeah, we've come here a lot. It's a great place to have lunch or have a nice Italian dessert. So yeah, if you're ever in the neighborhood, you should definitely check it out.
Yeah.
So now we're going to walk about 15 blocks and go to Roosevelt Hospital. That's on 59th Street and 10th Avenue.
Such a grim destination, but necessary.
Okay, so we just came from Cafe La Fortuna up on the Upper West Side, and now we're here at 59th Street and 10th Avenue at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital. John Lennon was brought to the emergency room on December 8th, 1980 after being shot. He arrived here right before 11 o'clock and was pronounced dead at approximately 11:07. The news spread immediately that he had died on the news feeds. Did you hear about that?
Well, most people heard about it from Howard Cosell on Monday Night Football. John had a history with Monday Night Football anyway. He knew Howard Cosell and had previously been interviewed by him on a Monday Night Football broadcast, and was even introduced to Ronald Reagan, who explained the game of football to him on another broadcast of Monday Night Football. So Howard Cosell broke into the football game that night and announced that John had been shot in New York and was dead on arrival at Roosevelt Hospital. Most people in America who found out that night found out that way.
Yeah, actually, I was at home and my father was watching the football broadcast, and he came in my room and told me that John Lennon had been killed. And it was just such an outrageous piece of news. I didn't believe it at all. I didn't give it a second thought. I thought, you've misunderstood. And I just went to sleep, and the next day, every radio station was playing Beatles music, and then I knew it was true.
Yeah, actually, I'm one of the few people that didn't find out about it from Howard Cosell, interestingly. I was at college out on Long Island at the time, and was watching a totally different channel with a local news feed. And the local sportscaster broke into the program and said that this had happened. And I remember being utterly shocked and sitting up in bed and screaming and just being completely in shock. But I did find out about it that night, but not from Howard Cosell.
And even Yoko, she came here in a separate police car, and they told her around 11:15 that he was dead, and she was in a total state of shock. She didn't believe it.
No, there's actually a famous picture of her with David Geffen escorting her out of the hospital afterwards. And apparently the quote was that she said she wouldn't believe that he was dead, and she kept repeating, "Are you telling me that he's sleeping?" And she was extremely distraught, needless to say, and in complete shock and denial, wouldn't believe that it was happening.
Yeah, I think it's hard to believe it's been over 25 years, and I still think every Beatle fan still cannot believe that he was killed. It was just such a tragedy.
It was definitely a shock that nobody expected in a million years, and we still mourn him every day.
But on a lighter note, we're here to celebrate his life in New York, and actually Yoko even said after he died, she said, "Please do not blame New York for his death because it could have happened anywhere."
Yeah. It wasn't a New Yorker who killed him either, so I want people to remember that people of New York loved having John here. So we were in a shock as much as everybody else. It wasn't the city that did it. So.
Right.
So Trina, now that we've seen Roosevelt Hospital, where are we going to go now?
We're going to go further downtown to the former Apple offices. It's not too far from here. It's on Broadway. So we're going to keep going down to Midtown.
Sounds great.
Goodbye, John Lennon. Goodbye. Goodbye, John Lennon. Goodbye.
So we just came about 7 blocks from Roosevelt Hospital, and now we're here at 54th Street and Broadway. We're actually right across from the famous Ed Sullivan Theater where John Lennon performed with the Beatles. So we're at 1700 Broadway, and this is where the former U.S. Apple offices were. After the Beatles manager Brian Epstein died in 1967, they hired Alan Klein, who was based in New York, and he already had offices here. So in the late 60s, whenever the Beatles needed to do any kind of business, they would come to this building.
And it was also here in the early 70s that John Lennon met May Pang, who was working for Alan Klein as a secretary, and in 1970 was assigned to assist John and Yoko for a couple of experimental films. And she worked for them and then later became their personal assistant and started working exclusively for them up at the Dakota. In 1973, with Yoko's blessing, May went with John to Los Angeles and began a relationship with him. And it was an 18-month period that is sometimes referred to as his lost weekend.
Right, and May actually wrote a book about her experiences with John in 1983, a book called Loving John.
Right, that book is out of print right now, but you can get it on eBay. I've seen copies available. But the exciting news is that she's actually got another book that is scheduled to come out in early 2008 if her publisher sticks to the schedule. So we might have some new updates from May Pang very soon.
Now we're going to go a few blocks further down to the Hit Factory Studios on 48th Street.
We've walked west of Broadway between 8th and 9th Avenues on West 48th Street in the neighborhood of Hell's Kitchen, now known as Clinton. And we're on this quiet tree-lined block, which looks rather nondescript, but there is a reason why we're here, right, Trina?
Yeah, we're right in front of 353. That's where the Hit Factory recording studio used to be. It's called Sear Studio now. And Hit Factory opened in the late 60s, and they actually moved the location in 1991 up to 54th Street. But back in 1980, this is where John and Yoko recorded the Double Fantasy album. They started in August and did the recording in September, and then the next few months they alternated between here and the record plant to do the mixing.
Right, and the single, Just Like Starting Over, was released at the end of October 1980, and the album, Double Fantasy, came out on November 17th, 1980. And this was the first time John had been in a recording studio in over 4 years.
Right, and actually John was planning to do a tour in 1981 to promote Double Fantasy, and he contacted his Aunt Mimi and said he was going to come home in 81.
Unfortunately, that never happened, but we can dream, can't we?
So we're going to continue a few blocks down to the record plant studio.
Wow, it sure did get hot today.
Yeah, I had to take off my jacket. But here we are on 44th Street. This is actually the site of the old record plant studio. It opened in 1968 and it stayed open here for about 20 years till the late 80s. Now their main studio is in Los Angeles.
So it was here at the record plant on 44th Street, 321 West 44th Street, where the first album ever recorded here was Electric Ladyland by the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And John worked on several of his albums here, including Imagine, Walls and Bridges, and Double Fantasy.
Right, and one of the notable recording sessions was also the recording for Happy Christmas, War is Over. That was in 1971, and they actually had the Harlem Community Choir come down to join in on the recording. It was an unusual session because it was made up of children ages 4 to 12, so they had to do it in the afternoon so the kids could be home in time to get to bed.
There is some dispute as to whether John was on his way home from the Hit Factory or the record plant on the night he was killed. It's been cited in various ways in various sources. The easiest way to find out what is probably correct is where Walking on Thin Ice was being mixed and recorded that night, which is probably easy to find out if you look for the documentation, because he was holding the tapes of that song in his hands the night he was shot.
Yeah, actually, if you look at Yoko's album Season of Glass, in the liner notes it says that Walking on Thin Ice was recorded at the Hit Factory, but then mixed at the record plant between November and December of 1980. So with those dates, it's most likely that they were here that fateful night on December 8th. And also Bob Gruen took photos of them just 2 days before at the record plant. So they were continuing work. They were going to continue work on December 8th at the same studio.
Right. Now, those pictures that Bob Gruen took are the famous ones of John and Yoko with the giant guitar, the one where John is pinning Yoko to the wall or where he's standing next to the giant guitar. The guitar was actually made by John for the art exhibition, This Is Not Here, that was in Syracuse, New York. And after the exhibition was over, it was way too big to fit into their apartment, so he loaned it to the record plant so that they could keep it in their lobby. Everybody felt that it was an ideal decoration for a recording studio.
Yeah, and that picture was pretty famous. Most people will recognize that picture where he's kind of pinning Yoko against the wall. So now we're going to head down, further down Midtown, about 10 blocks to Madison Square Garden. That's on 33rd Street and 7th Avenue.
John Lennon singing in the life of day.
So we've just come about 12 blocks downtown. We're here at 33rd and 7th in front of Madison Square Garden. It's also called the world's most famous arena and also referred to as the Garden. Now, many famous rock concerts have been held here, and this is the place to play in New York for a musician.
Right. Now, this is actually the fourth site of the arena known as Madison Square Garden. The original Madison Square Garden was built in 1879 down at 26th Street and Madison Avenue off Madison Square, hence the name Madison Square Garden. A second location later followed at the same location, and then in 1925, the garden was moved uptown to 50th Street and 8th Avenue. In the early 60s, after the demolition of the original Penn Station, this current Madison Square Garden was built atop the current Penn Station at 33rd Street and 7th Avenue. It's hosted many, many concerts. Many artists have recorded live here, including Led Zeppelin, Frank Sinatra, Barbra Streisand, and numerous others. And it is, as you say, the place to play in New York.
And in August of 1972, John and Yoko, backed by the Elephants Memory Band, performed at the benefit concerts for the Willowbrook School for the Mentally Handicapped. These concerts were organized by the newscaster Geraldo Rivera, and some other artists that performed included Roberta Flack and Sha Na Na.
Right. Now, I remember the stories when Geraldo Rivera broke the news about Willowbrook. Willowbrook was a state home for the mentally handicapped on Staten Island, and it was very, very notorious once he broke the story about how we were treating our mentally disabled people. It was the start of Geraldo's career, and it was so important to him to try and help these people that he arranged these concerts. And since he knew a lot of these people through his job as a newscaster, he was able to get them to come play.
And another famous show was in November on Thanksgiving of 1974, where John Lennon came out as a guest during Elton John's concert and played 3 songs with him, including Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Now, the way this appearance came about is that Elton John and John Lennon recorded that song together, and Elton John made a bet with John Lennon and said, if this song, I bet this song will go to #1, and when it does, I want you to come and appear at my concert.
John didn't believe that the song would really go to #1, so he thought he was off the hook. It was certainly a #1 hit, and he had to honor the bet. So he came and he played here with Elton that night. It was his last appearance on stage in front of an audience, a live audience with Elton John that night. People think that this was the time that he got back together with Yoko, because this happened during his separation from Yoko. And the story that was put forth after he got back together with her was that they got back together as a result of this meeting at this concert, and he didn't know that Yoko was going to be in the audience. Now, May Pang has stated in her book that not only did John know that Yoko was going to be in the audience, but he asked her to arrange the ticket for Yoko, and she was the one who did it at his request. So depending on what you believe, he may or may not have known Yoko was going to be there. And actually, May states that he didn't get back together with her until several months later, even though they later put forth that they had gotten back together again right after that concert.
And also, this is the only venue where all 4 ex-Beatles have performed as solo performers. Of course, George Harrison did his famous concert for Bangladesh here in 1971.
Right. This was also the site of the concert for New York City that Paul McCartney organized to benefit victims of September 11th. And it's also the home of lots of things besides concerts, like the New York Knicks and the New York Liberty women's basketball and the New York Rangers. So it's a really famous arena, and you can come see music and come see sports. It's great.
Yeah, it is great. So we're actually going to go now downtown to Greenwich Village and visit Bob Gruen at his studio.
Sounds great. Looking forward to meeting him.
John Lennon singing in the life of day. Make creation see insecurity. Maybe looking over questions, answer can bring peace. John Lennon, God bless you. John Lennon, God bless you.
So here we are. We've come downtown from Madison Square Garden, and we're now in the West Village on Bethune Street, a block off the Hudson River, all the way west. And we're about to stop in and see Bob Gruen, the photographer, here at his studio on Bethune Street.
Yeah, Bob is a leading rock and roll photographer, and he actually took some very iconic pictures of John Lennon in New York. So let's go talk to him. We're here at Greenwich Village at the studio of one of the world's leading rock photographers, Bob Gruen. Thanks for joining us today, Bob.
No, I'm glad to be here.
And you had great access to John and Yoko in the 70s. You actually became sort of like their official photographer. Can you tell us how you first met John and Yoko at the Apollo Theater?
Yes, actually, just to correct it, I wasn't their official photographer. I was more like a personal photographer, someone who was a friend that they would call for pictures. But they were kind of world famous, and they had a lot of people taking their picture. And in fact, that was part of how I met them, because at the Apollo Theater there was a benefit for the families of the prisoners who were injured in the riot at Attica Prison. And I went there to see Aretha Franklin, And by surprise, when I got there, the announcer said, "Ladies and gentlemen, John Lennon and Yoko Ono and the Plastic Ono Band." And I was like really excited. I knew they had moved to New York, but I didn't know that they would be there at the Apollo. I hadn't seen them yet. They'd been here for a few months already. And so I took some pictures of them playing on stage, and then backstage they were waiting to leave, and a lot of people would gather around taking snapshot pictures and pictures with John and Yoko. So I took a couple of pictures of them as well. And at one point, John sort of said something like, you know, people are always taking our picture and we never get to see them. What happens to all these pictures? And I said, well, I knew that they lived here in Greenwich Village, so I said, well, I live around the corner from you. And he said, well, if you live around the corner, then drop the pictures off. So a few days later, I just went by and I left them there for them.
And so the agreement was that they didn't necessarily pay you, but they gave you unlimited access, but they wanted approval of the photos. Is that true?
Yes, that's how we worked things out. I actually didn't meet them that time. I just left them some pictures, and then a few months later, I met them through an interview. Someone was making a story about the Elephant's Memory Band, and John and Yoko were using the Elephant's Memory to record. And so I went to a hotel where they were doing the interview, and I met John and Yoko, and took some pictures of them that night with the Elephant's Memory Band. And a few weeks later, they got in touch with me to use those pictures, and that's when we really started talking. I showed them my other pictures, and they saw the kind of work I did, and asked me to come back to the studio and take more pictures, but to always show them the pictures that I took. And that I never really worked for John and Yoko very often, but usually it was just taking the pictures. They would give me the access, so I would have pictures available for all the magazines, and the magazines would pay me for the use of the pictures. And the deal was that I would always show them the pictures and not use things that they didn't like. And so I would always go through my pictures and pick out the ones that I liked, and then I would show that to them, and they could have their choice. And it was, once in a while they might, you know, take one of the ones I picked out, but not very often. They usually agreed with me, and I had plenty of pictures to use.
And since you lived right down the street from them, what was it like hanging out at their apartment on Bank Street?
Oh, Bank Street was very nice. They had a small place. The front room was kind of a long, dark loft, almost made me feel like a farmhouse. There was a little office area in the front, and couches in the reception area in the middle, and a kitchen, and then a little hallway. And in the back, there was a very tall, high, white room that had one of the largest beds I'd ever seen. I heard later that they had gotten a really extra large mattress and 2 church pews, and just kind of laid the mattress on the church pews to hold it up. And the biggest TV I had ever seen in the middle of the room.
Really?
And they used to kind of hold court there and sit in the bed and meet people and take care of things. It was very comfortable, place, small place. But eventually, because the door to the apartment actually opened onto the street, after a couple of years, people found out where they were, and more people started coming around, and they felt it was safer to move uptown. I remember being there one time when an assistant came in and said that someone was at the door, and they said, well, who is it? And the answer was, well, it's Jesus. Jesus from Toronto. So with those kind of people showing up, they decided to move uptown.
And you also were at 2 of the most famous concert appearances John did in New York, the one-to-one concerts in 1972, and also his appearance with Elton John in '74. But you had the behind-the-scenes access. You saw the rehearsals and the recording. Tell us how...
Well, for the one-to-one concert, I was very involved. And although I had worked with Elton before and John, I only found out about that reunion, that appearance at the very last minute. But the one-to-one concert was with the Elephant's Memory, and it led up. There was a series of recording sessions like every week for a couple of months, and then into the summer, and then they came up with the idea of doing the concert at Madison Square Garden, and started rehearsing for that at the Fillmore East Theater, which had been closed, but they rented it to use as a large rehearsal space, and we were over there for a couple of weeks every day, going through the concerts, and it was really very exciting, very, very exciting, because I had met John when he was recording new material with the Elephant's Memory in the spring, and they were working on that, and they were working on some Elephant's Memory albums. And he was a great guy, and he was John Lennon, neighbor and Elephant's Memory leader, kind of. And then when they started rehearsing for the one-to-one concert, he started singing some of his own songs and some of the Beatles songs, Come Together and Imagine, and Cold Turkey and things like that. And hearing his voice sing those songs, it kind of was startling, because all of a sudden you realize like this guy you've been hanging out with really is one of the Beatles.
Right.
It was very exciting, very exciting. And then the actual concert was probably one of the highlights of my life. And having that kind of access, that I was standing on the stage next to the piano and John was singing Imagine. I think that was probably the peak
Wow.
moment of going to concerts.
And then once they were at the Dakota, you visited a lot, and one time Paul and Linda came by.
Oh, well, I used to stop by the Dakota from time to time, and we'd just sit around and have tea and watch TV. And one night in December, one year, somebody was ringing the bell of the apartment. And at the Dakota, there's a lot of security, like really strict security, and nobody can come up without being announced. So they were very nervous that somebody was actually ringing the apartment the apartment doorbell. They were already there up on the floor they were on. And they sent me out to check to see who it was, and there was a double door security entrance, and I opened the inside door, and I could hear what sounded like some kids singing Christmas carols. And I called back to John and Yoko, like, don't worry, it's just kids singing Christmas carols, it's okay. And I opened the outer door, and it wasn't kids, it was Paul and Linda.
Wow.
And that was quite a surprise. I never expected that, and they didn't expect it either. And Paul and Linda came dancing in, and I said, come on in the bedroom, and everybody they were really happy to see each other. In the press, there's a lot of stories of animosity and disagreements, and I think the disagreements are mostly between the lawyers, and that's just business, because when I saw John and Paul together, they really seemed like old mates, schoolmates who hadn't seen each other for a while. I'm really glad to see each other. Linda and Yoko got along fine. We all had tea together, and Paul had just come back from an Australian tour where he had sold out in Japan, and then was denied entry because of some previous marijuana convictions. And he talked about how sad they were not to be able to go to Japan and not to be able to get in that time, and how much that they'd enjoyed it as Beatles, and they were sorry that they couldn't go back this time.
And you took that most famous shot of John wearing the New York City t-shirt. You actually gave him the shirt and cut off the sleeves?
Well, a year before I took the picture, I gave him the shirt. I used to wear that kind of New York City shirt all the time. Some guys just made them up. They were sort of homemade shirts, and they would sell them on the street, like not even in a store, but on the street in Times Square for $5, and I would buy them from time to time when I saw them. And I ended up with a collection of about half a dozen of them because I used to wear it almost every day. And I was proud to be from New York. I started to travel a lot. It was kind of announced New York City. It was a strong, powerful look. And I got a few for friends of mine, and I got one for John Lennon one time. And I would cut the sleeves off with my buck knife to give it that New York look. And then I was taking some pictures for his album cover for Walls and Bridges up on the roof of a penthouse apartment that he had. And because we had the whole skyline of New York behind us, I asked if he still had that New York City t-shirt I had given him, and he knew right where it was, even though he'd been to Los Angeles and back several times that year. He knew right where the shirt was. He went and put it on, and we took what we thought was going to be just a simple publicity picture. But just the kind of confidence it shows, the way he felt at the time. He was kind of cleaning up from a year away in Los Angeles. He was feeling a lot better being back in New York. And it just kind of came together as one of people's most popular pictures of him.
Yeah, and those shirts you can buy anywhere now.
I hope so. Some of them are bootlegs, but there is one official shirt out there that I get, a couple of pennies every time somebody buys one.
Oh, okay. And you also took the iconic photo of him flashing the peace sign in front of the Statue of Liberty.
That's a picture I'm very proud of because I thought that concept up and asked John if he thought it would be a good idea to go out to the Statue of Liberty and take some pictures of him there to dramatize the fact that the United States government was trying to throw John Lennon out of the country. Apparently it's a bad thing to say give peace a chance when you're in the middle of a war. And it really frightened the government that John was encouraging people to think about peace. So they wanted to throw him out. And I thought that the Statue of Liberty welcomed people to New York, especially people of John Lennon's character. And so I thought it would be a good idea to take a picture out there. In fact, the story of John's deportation at the time was not in the press a lot, and the picture wasn't really published very much in the 70s. People, I think, were afraid of really talking about the story while it was going on. But in the 80s, after John Lennon had died, it kind of took on a whole new meaning for people, because I think that John Lennon represents personal freedom in a lot of the same ways that the Statue of Liberty does.
And you actually took his green card photo as well?
The little ID picture that's on the green card, yeah, that's what I meant by personal photographer, that when they would need a picture, and he wouldn't want to trust somebody on the corner drugstore to keep it private, he would call me and know that if he wanted it private, it would stay private.
And I really enjoyed your book, John Lennon, The New York Years, and it was interesting that you wrote about how Yoko did not like to be pictured smiling. That's a Japanese tradition?
Yes, it's kind of a custom in Japan. People face life much, seriously, and they don't think that you should just be grinning for no reason at all. Like in the West, you think you just put on a smile for a picture, whereas in Japan, it's much more of a realistic way of having a picture taken. People don't smile all day long, and they're more often just serious and calm. And she told me that, and I actually saw a vivid example of it because I saw a book about Westerners in Japan. And a traditional thing is to get a picture of the entire family at a wedding situation. And so there might be 45 or 60 people in a wedding photo, like both sides of the family, all the relatives gathered together. And in this cartoon book, it said you can tell the Westerner because he's the one who's smiling in the wedding picture. They show all these serious faces and one person smiling. And about a year later, when I was visiting at John and Yoko's house, I saw a picture that they had done for John and Yoko's wedding. They had done the traditional wedding picture in Japan with Yoko's entire family, and there must have been 60 people there. And they all had serious faces except John had a big grin on his face.
That's so funny.
And so it really is true that in Japan the custom is not to smile. But Yoko Ono that I know smiles a lot. She's a very fun person to be with. People ask me about Yoko and say, what kind of woman is Yoko Ono? And I always say, well, she's the kind of woman that John Lennon could marry.
Right.
And John was a very funny guy. You couldn't hang out with John Lennon if he didn't have a sense of humor. And so I was always trying to encourage Yoko to share a bit of that side with her and not always be so serious. But she said that it's just the way you're brought up in Japan, that life is serious and you should approach it seriously.
Wow.
And she certainly does.
So only a month after Sean was born, John invited you over to take some family photos?
Yes, John was very happy when Sean was born. He called me up about a month later and asked me to come over and take pictures to send to their families to show the new baby. And he was in the most ecstatic mood. I saw him the whole time I knew him. He had a big smile. He was very happy to be taking care of the baby. He was changing the baby's diapers and giving him his bottle, and was really, really happy and kind of took on that role for the next 5 years. His main concern was raising Sean and being in touch with him and being part of his life.
And you were actually supposed to meet him at the Dakota. Was it the day he died?
Well, 2 days later, I was coming by the studio that night. I was supposed to show them the pictures before I brought him down to the Village Voice, and it was getting within a couple of hours of the deadline. It was time to go. And then my doorman buzzed me and asked if I had a radio on, and I said I didn't, and he said that he had heard John Lennon was shot. And my first thought was that he had been mugged or something, maybe somebody tried to shoot him. And then my phone started ringing, and then a friend of mine said he was watching the TV and started quoting the television and said John Lennon's dead. And I just remember kind of sinking down to the floor and thinking, what do you do to change this? How do you change this? But death is not negotiable. And I remember Phil Spector was talking about obscenity, and he said it's not obscene to talk about making love to your loved ones. He said the most obscene four-letter word is the word dead. And then I thought about what was going to happen. Like the phone started ringing a lot, and I realized the whole world was watching. Newspapers were already starting to call up, ask for pictures, and I kind of went over to my file cabinets and realized that it was my job to get out the good pictures of John Lennon and make him look good in the papers. And so that's what I started doing.
And so for the Central Park vigil that Sunday.
Well, yes, Ron Delsner called me a couple of days later and asked me if I had a picture that he could put in Central Park. They were going to have kind of a place for people to gather, although Yoko had called for moments of silence anywhere, wherever you were around the world. but the city felt that a lot of people were going to gather at the Dakota, and they didn't want a big crowd in the streets, so they redirected people into Central Park. And he asked me for a picture to put in the bandshell there. And I remember asking him if he wanted to see a few to select one. He said, "No, I know you'll pick a good one." And I thought about some of the ones of John with the guitar, because everybody thought him as a musician, but I thought to a lot of people he was much more than a musician. And I thought about one where he kind of looked intellectual and thinking and reflective. But I thought that he was more than that too. He was very confident and upfront. And Yoko had just written a piece in the paper saying, "Don't blame New York City. It wasn't the violence that people think you might find in New York. John really loved living in New York. He was very happy to be in New York, and that the person who killed him traveled halfway around the world and would have gone to wherever John was living, and that he was living in New York. And so I tend to think of New York not as the place where John died, but as the place where John lived. And so I chose the picture of him with the New York City T-shirt to put in there, and it was carried kind of around the world in a lot of press and TV, and started becoming a pretty well-known picture after that. But John was very happy to be here. People tend to leave each other alone in New York. A lot of times if you see somebody that looks like Robert Redford in Des Moines, Iowa, it might be somebody that looks like Robert Redford. But if you see somebody that looks like him in New York, it's probably him. And there's a lot of people like that, a lot of famous people, a lot of worldwide celebrities live or travel through New York. And the people who live here are busy, and you kind of get used to it. You see somebody famous, it's like, oh, there's John Lennon. But you're not going to let him get your cab, because you got somewhere to go too. And you don't have time to run over and bother him for an autograph. And so you might tell your friends, they're not like, "Hey, I saw John Lennon in the street today." But they really didn't bother him, and they really left him alone like any other New Yorker to take a walk and go be around his neighborhood. So he really liked it here in New York.
And since you knew John so well, how do you think he might be involved today if he were alive in all the political causes and things?
I don't really like to speculate on what people could be doing. I don't know I think that, had he lived, the world would have been a different place, and we wouldn't be in necessarily the same situations we are. John was very ahead of his time. When he died, he was really concerned about ideas of parenting, about living a healthy life and eating well, about controlling excess or abuse of drugs and alcohol. And these are all issues that became very important in people's lives in the years to come. So I think he would have been a leader for those ideas. But I don't know what the world would have been like, had he been able to live. But we live in the world we do, and you get the time you get. And I think that he created a lot of art, and he left behind a great legacy, and that people should listen to his records and read the interviews with him. I think that what John Lennon himself said is much more important than what any of us say about him. So it's really more important to really listen to John Lennon.
So wasn't Bob a great person to talk to?
Oh, very interesting. He had some really terrific stories, and it was wonderful to meet him and see his work.
So now we're going to head over just a few blocks to Bank Street, where John and Yoko used to live, right here in the village.
Let's go. So we've come around the corner from Bob Gruen's studio on Bethune Street, and we're now on Bank Street between Greenwich and Washington, still in Greenwich Village. And we're approaching 105 Bank Street.
Yeah, actually, this is the apartment where John and Yoko first lived when they came to New York. In the summer of '71, they had been staying off and on at the St. Regis Hotel uptown, and then they decided to get an apartment down here in the village. That was about October '71, and they stayed here through early '73 before they got the apartment at the Dakota.
Right, and they had originally come to New York so that they could fight for custody of Yoko's daughter from her first marriage, Kyoko, and they expected to wage the battle for custody here in New York, so they felt that it was important to live here. Living in Greenwich Village, which has always been a hotbed of activism and always been full of bohemian people and political activists, allowed them to interact with some of the political activists at the time, like Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman and other people, who went in and out of this apartment all the time and helped them become involved with their political causes.
Another person John and Yoko met when they lived down here on Bank Street was street musician David Peel, and he became friends with them and developed a working relationship with them. So we're here meeting David Peel today. How's it going?
How are you?
Hi,
Hey, how are
David.
you?
Nice to meet
Nice
you.
talking both of you like this. Welcome to New York City's the home of John Lennon.
Thank
So
you.
can you tell us how you first met John and Yoko?
Yeah, I met John and Yoko. I met them in 1971 through Howard Smith. We met them at on St. Mark's Place at a place called Limbo. Limbo was a clothes store, and the guy's name was Belinsky, or something, something similar to that name, who had a policy that rock stars, any customers, anybody who was a customer had access to the place without reservation or without blocking off. So with John and Yoko there, anyone went there too. A friend of mine told me that he was there, so I went there. I shook his hand in the beginning and said, "I'm David Peel from Electra Records." I said, "Hi." So, but then after that, Howard Smith saw me. Howard Smith says, "Oh, David, I want you to meet John." It was a second rude awakening, and by doing that right now, I was reintroduced to John Lennon again. This time it's stuck because it's the old saying, it's who you know. Somebody knew John, and now he has a trust in me because of a sponsor of his sponsor and friend Howard Smith.
Now, didn't they really liked your song called "The Pope Smokes Dope"?
See what happened. See what happened is they made a plan where I would go to Washington Square Park that Sunday. It was a Friday, right? And they would see my show because I always played it every weekend. So I did the songs, different songs, Marijuana, Revolution, and I sang "The Pope Smokes Dope," and I saw him glitter up like this. And I'm saying, nobody ever paid to see rock stars. So why should rock stars never paid to see anyone? So why should we pay to see a rock star?
Oh.
And he says, he must be talking about me. And to make a long story short, like he liked the song when I did the Pope Smokes Dope. He started saying, mimicking under his breath. And what somebody doesn't know now, I had my friend, it was actually Danny Fields, who was the manager of Ramones, point him out to me, because he was my manager in the beginning when I worked with Electra. So to make a long story short, he pointed him out to me. I told my photographer, I don't care what he says, Howard, take pictures until they want out of film. We took pictures like that, I said, do you have enough? No. Click, 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 click. And that became the part where the Pope Smokes Dope became into being, and that's how the journey to that record came on its own, what do you call it, a highway of activity.
Wow.
And wasn't there a story where you were all marching down the street singing that song?
Oh yeah, now what happens now, later on, he's telling Howard Smith, Howard told me that he liked that song, The Pope Smokes Dope. Yeah, I could make a record with him someday, whatever. Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman were good friends who were revolutionary, were with him. And they were friends of mine too, because we were activists, political activists. And so Jerry, I wrote a song. Jerry told me, like, John would like to see you, and on East Village, come to your house, come to your apartment. Well, he didn't come to my apartment until we ended up being in the Fillmore East. And what we did is, I always brought my guitar with me, except today because it's a different time period. And I played the Pope Smokes Dope, and they sang along with me. But I remember before, and Yoko just smiling, and a few people were singing the Pope Smokes Dope together. He was singing with me, and a policeman came and told to get out of here. We were calling the big crowd, and then we just went back down to his limo was on 3rd Avenue, from 2nd to 3rd, and that became a Kodak moment, I would call it, right?
Wow.
But make a long story short, I went back home and wrote a song called The Ballad of New York City, John Lennon, Yoko Ono.
Right.
Came to visit New York City, met the people from the streets, and all about that. They liked the song, and they brought me to Bank Street right here, auditioned me. He wanted to hear the song in person. So I did this song in person called The Battle of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, because I realized nobody ever wrote a song about such famous people. It's about time I do something like this.
So that was your inspiration. You took it from that moment when you were all singing
I
together.
said right now, but also I said no one ever done this. I always had to always look at very futuristic and also widespread and seeing what's going on, and that was missing. I mean, no one ever wrote a song about New York City either.
No?
Except the one in John Lennon, New York City. That's the only song about New York City. It's about. I love New York as a state, but New York City was John Lennon's story about the New York City.
Now, he actually mentions you in that song. How did that feel?
Oh, the Battle of New York. I mean,
New York City.
New York
He
City?
mentions your name.
What happened? There's a strange story about that. I wrote a song about Bob Dylan. I figured I'm going to do John Lennon, I'm going to do Bob Dylan too. I sent him a copy. He lived on 94 McDougal Street. So I write a song about him. He called me up, hey, what's this about? You writing a song about, man? Bob Dylan, yeah, you're Bob Dylan. It is Bob Dylan. What's the song about, man? Then he came over my house. I told John Lennon about it later. And Bob Dylan said he wanted to write a song about me.
Wow.
So I told John Lennon that. And John Lennon heard it. 3 days later, he gave me a call. I wrote a song that I have you included in the song.
Very cool.
Over the telephone. And that's how it came.
So it was to compete with Bob Dylan.
What?
It was to compete with Bob Dylan?
Don't compete, just complete. And he did that right there. And,
that's cool.
And that whole thing became Bing because of the step-by-step. I multiply my song repertoire about Bob Dylan and John Lennon. It became a complete circle.
Wow.
And he wrote a song about me, which is a great honor of all time in that particular point.
That's wonderful.
So this goes on, this is continuous to this day, an honor I'll never forget.
So actually, John and Yoko actually produced your third album. Is that true?
That's an honor. What happened later on, when I came down here, John said, would you like to, are you on any record label? I said, no. Would you like to be on Apple? I said, of course. And so they produced it. I happened to be doing the recording anyway, some parts in a place called Audio Technique, which was near the Hotel Roosevelt, near the Grand Central Station. So I was doing something there already. And what happened was that by doing that right now, he just came in to finish and see what we had done. He came out, it was a Monday, and we did the recording there. We were there till about 3 o'clock in the morning. He wiped everybody out.
Wow.
To make a long story short, the engineer says, hey, John, nothing personal, but I have a wife and kids to go home to right now. So I'm very, very tired. I have to go home right now. The next day, we gave him the money to bring the whole thing to a record plant,
Wow.
where it's 24/7.
Yeah.
They work on shifts.
Right.
And anytime we recorded, it was like 7 o'clock to question mark whenever you finished.
Wow.
So see, that's the power of them. I had 3 shifts there. With Dennis, I've got Dennis there in their voice, Chikala was there. And that's when I first saw Bob Gruen there. He began when I began his whole career.
Very
at the
cool.
same time.
Now, did you actually played live with John Lennon just a few times at some of the concerts?
Oh, the other way around. Yeah, not only did I play live, but he played live with me.
Wow.
It began
That's
with
cool.
me playing with him at the John Sinclair benefit.
Right.
At 10-4-2 in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Then later on we did the day before show.
Right.
And he played on my band. He played the washtub bass or the skiffle board.
right,
No
right.
way.
Yoko played percussion.
Right, right.
And Jay Room played the finger keyboards.
Oh,
Wow.
cool.
And I had the rest of my band there. And what you don't know, that's when Ace Frehley wanted to play in the band. I thought, who the heck are you? I don't know.
He was nobody then.
I'm jumping on the bandwagon. So I said, thanks, but no thanks. We already have a band. And he came Kiss, and I kissed him off. But I love, but all due respect, I still think that Ace Frehley is the John Lennon of Kiss. He really had a natural, same kind of personality. I liked him. We just didn't know at the time. I know now.
So can you describe the apartment?
What it was like to hang out at the
Yeah.
apartment and
Over here, okay. The chauffeur always keeps right here, a spot here. They'd always be here. The FBI, FBI were all over here.
Really?
FBI, or like a secret light. Over here, we're going this way. I always make sure I got here for dinner time.
Oops.
Yoko, an excellent cook. God, can she cook? Microbiotic food. Because she used to work at the Cauldron and also I think called the Annex. There was some place there. She was a microbiotic food place on 2nd Avenue. So like I don't know if I remember the Annex. I don't know if it was the Annex, but one was the Cauldron, one was the Annex. I'm not sure if that's the name, but she worked there as a cook and also worked before she met John.
Wow.
She used to put her paintings all over the place.
Ah.
So with that, now I come here. I knew dinner time. And here would be my friends here, and they had a big stream of people there. FBI watching us all over here.
I love it. I love it.
I don't mind the publicity. As you see, I did pretty good in the files. So we're getting down here, and we did play our music here. The back had the back was a bedroom. So you have like this now. Here's the front. This is where people sit, like, and you have a curtain over here in the back. So over here is a staircase that goes up to the
Second
terrace
floor?
over here, right? So here, everyone hung out here, and only the people he wanted to see came to his bed, a big gigantic bed, and it was over this way with a big television here. A piano, like as if they opened, the piano was over here, and we came here. You had seats here, and a desk right in front here, and a desk over there, etc., etc. And a small place, but very narrow, but very, very tasteful. You know what I mean? And up here, and I never went up to the terrace though. I don't know why. I never asked. Here we go again. And that's basically the layout right there. But it was actually getting too small and too many people coming here. They decided to get out of here because FBI. Bank Street. He did not live 105 Bank. He did not live here. That's 105 Bank Street. This is 105 and a quarter. They took away the sign. I see nothing there. Middleton, right? Like it.
Guess that's who lives in there now.
So who were some of the people that were here when you would hang
What?
out? Who were some of the other people that came to hang out?
Jerry Rubin, Abby Hoffman, John Sinclair was there. After he got busted, I had John meet him there. Bob Dylan was here.
Wow.
Okay, you had Andy Warhol,
Wow.
Wow.
David Peel, and the Lower East Side. I had let me see, Yoko Ono, of course, John Lennon, of course. You had Pete Bendry, Bob Gruen, the photographer, and who else do you have? I don't know if Bobby Seale. I'm not really sure about him. I think some of the people from the Fugs. I think Ed Sanders came down here. See, down here was a place called Westbeth, and that's where Jerry Rubin lived. It's a big on Bank Street.
Oh.
Down here is where they live. They were subletting that there at the same time they were here. And also Howard Smith, A.J. Weberman. And these are the few of the people I know of offhand that in our entourage. Anyone else I can't really. Oh, you also May Pang, I guess.
Yeah, she was
That's
their
fun.
assistant at the time.
Right.
Sure.
I never saw Pete Bennett down here though, but.
Oh, Pete was their their PR
Big
guy.
Rich.
Yes.
Hey, no, let me quote about Pete Bennett right now. When Alan Klein, he tried to get, we actually tried to get the whole Apple record account and become the owner of it and manage it for the Beatles. We radicals stopped them from doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Me, with Tom Facade, A.J. Weberman, all people like this, we fought back. And we told John, we said, John, he's trying to rip you off. So whatever that means. And also I took to Pete Bennett about this. So he says about Pete Bennett, he says, Pete Bennett is sometimes a pain in the ass, but he always gets the job done. And that's to this day, and then this is what made them go to a different level right now because of his work there. Unfortunately, Alan Klein tried to, what do you call, pleasure and defraud
You
and
turned out to
embezzle
be right
the
about him.
records and went to jail for that.
Yeah.
And
You know
later,
Klein was a slime. I knew the Klein was a slime. Remember that?
later in 1980, you put out an album called John Lennon for President.
Okay, now the honor. Here we are. After we left, I said, now well, I'm not going to stop now. I like him, so I did John Lennon for President. I decided the Imagine called Rock and Roll Party, Imagine Party, right? The Imagine Party. Imagine John Lennon President. It's all like Sgt. Pepper's. So I went down to Federal Hall.
Wow.
I did the speech to nominate John Lennon for president, which is on there.
Very
I
Wow.
had my friends there. It was so eloquent that the security do it that I was actually illegally using it for a platform of speaking out without a permit. It was that good.
cool. Wow.
I got that. I put it on the album right now, and it was based on what's it called? Kennedy. What's his name? What's his name? The Kennedy from Massachusetts right now.
Oh, Ted Kennedy.
I took Ted Kennedy's speech, I transposed it, and made it into John Lennon's speech.
Oh,
The
that's
same
cool.
way Elton John took a Marilyn Monroe song and made it into Princess Diana.
Right,
So I did it. I love transposing, which the Beatles are always known for doing. So to make a long, what happened right now, I used that, and then I did the song John Lennon. We went to my apartment, which you'll see later on, about 10 people there, live playing John Lennon for president. Then I went to Washington Square Park, did another version acoustic.
Cool.
And that became the history of John Lennon for president. He found out about it from one of my friends. He said, "You tell David Peel, I want to know what he's doing about this John Lennon for president album we're doing."
Wow.
So we did that right now. He never got to that point because at that time it was 1980,
Right.
and by the time it came out in November, next month he was gone.
Yeah.
So that's a little story, but I did that right there, and I put it on the Elliot Mintz on the what do you call the
Lost Lennon
Lost
tapes?
Lennon tapes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was a radio show.
And then later on, we did I did one for John Lennon Forever. And I was John Lennon Forever. Now that's because after he passed away, he got killed. I had a big sign called John Lennon Forever right there. I made an album from that. We made it into a part of the box set in honor of John Lennon for the Peace Party.
Wonderful.
And now and it continues. I wrote one about John and Yoko. I always believe, to me, let me think. John Lennon had one part of my life very much as a singer. What I like about Yoko Ono, she really had the mind games more than John did. I mean, this thing going, having a clock with no hands, I love that, man. When I gave them, I gave them a cockroach. In an Indian box, like a little Indian box like this. And it was in my apartment, and I could squeeze it, put it like this.
Oh, that's
Like that.
funny.
This is my first present I ever gave him. I gave it to Yoko Ono. And it said, death of a cockroach. Born unknown, died 1971, rest in peace. Oh, John, look what David gave.
Wow.
I love her mind games.
That's
As a
interesting.
matter of fact, I gave her for her birthday, I gave her a Metro card, like this right now. I gave her a card like this. And on it, I gave her a card like this. I signed it back as a souvenir from New York City. And actually, look, I said, I learned from your mind games how to do this game. She thanked me for it like this, and we moved on.
Wow.
In a case like this on Bank Street here, the ironic thing about here, it has no entrance this way. It's blocked off here. You know, all the way around. He picked the perfect spot for a celebrity. He did not have big crowds. There were not big groupies here or Apple scruffs at all. Not here at all.
Wow.
Up on Apple Records and Broadway they did, but not here.
Right,
Because
right.
the location was ideal for people just to hang out.
That's a good
So in
point.
any case like this, but finally we did the interview how we met David Peel here. I began my record here, and most important right now, my career began with another friend who's an activist. We both being the same in legacy of the FBI in their files to continue our purpose to give peace another chance. Give peace a chance. 104 and a quarter. Remember, 105 and a quarter. It's 105 and a quarter. Ready? Beatles. 1/4 is John, Ringo, Paul, George. 1/4 of Beatles at 105 Bank Street was John Lennon.
Right.
That's my interpretation.
That's
Excellent.
great.
Excellent.
All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is John Lennon and Yoko Ono gave us a song called Give Peace a Chance.